You may or may not be aware of this. Keep it to yourself for the moment. You didn't hear it from me. But at the time I'm making this, down here in Australia, we've just had a national election. Now, I personally get a bit of enjoyment out of reading the stupidly big Senate paper that everyone's expected to navigate. The one that's about 3 times as wide as the professional, portable, lightweight cardboard polling booths that you're expected to fill them out in. And as I was going through the extended list of parties nominating to be our last line of democratic defence in the Australian Senate, I saw one name in particular written on that gigantic ballot paper that gave me such a case of whiplash, I nearly broke my neck. Sustainable Australia. Universal basic income. Universal basic income. Is it just me, or were people talking way more about universal basic income a few years ago, before the pandemic, before the face masks, before Orangina 2.0? It felt like I'd been transported back to the Monash University Whole Foods circa 2018, and I was listening to the left's answer to Henry Kissinger outlaying his grand strategy over the $3 dal and rice. Strategic competition, universal basic income, and whether, in the long run, Dan would stand up against to pimp a butterfly. There was a genuine period around this time that a lot of mileage was being given to the idea that technological progress was going to create a new mass class of unemployed people, a new class of non-working poor, and a consequent need for something like a universal basic income. Because universal basic income, UBI, is a form of social security. Most of you watching will already live in a country that has some form of social security system. In Australia, we have job seeker for unemployed people, we have the family tax benefits, we have disability pensions. If you live in a country with a relatively high standard of living, you will have some form of this too. Social payments going to the people who are most in need. UBI is a little different from most existing forms of welfare though, because of the U, the universal. UBI goes to everyone. It's an upfront, no strings attached payment to the entire population. It's insurance against the idea that heaps of us could soon, suddenly, without warning, be automated out of the workforce. We could become useless. Now, ideas come and go in economics like any other trend. Like fashion, like sandwiches, like anything else. And economics is the exact same. An idea will come along, get hyped up, presidential candidates will talk about it, pop echo books will be written about it, some Nordic country will run a successful pilot of it. And there are plenty of people out there fighting the good fight for the right reasons who genuinely want to use UBI as a way to help people at risk of slipping through the cracks. I endorse that sentiment. My heart bleeds deeply too. But for that exact reason, because my heart bleeds so deeply, I feel like it's my next civic duty to tell you who else is a fan of UBI.
We should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas.
Basic minimum earnings for everybody.
So guaranteed basic income or universal basic income, you like that?
100% think that's really important.
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Let's just double check that there isn't just maybe, perhaps, a little bit more to this one. There are a few ways that we could map the journey of universal basic income, but because I really don't want to make a video about modern monetary theory, I'm going to use Andrew Yang, the lawyer and businessman who ran for American president in the 2020 Democratic primaries. In those primaries, Andrew Yang ultimately carried a grand total of 0 states. In line with expectations. But by the time he dropped out, he had gotten a lot more attention than some of the other chorus members. And this was thanks in large part to the fact that the Times suited Andrew. Over the 2010s, as people had become more aware of the potential for technological progress and automation to completely disrupt existing working patterns, you saw a lot of economists of various persuasions coming out and advocating UBI, a simple, unconditional payment to everyone, simple insurance against the impending wave of mass job losses. And once UBI had entered the public psyche, it was only a matter of time before a perennial presidential candidate wrote a book about it. The War on Normal People, the truth about America's disappearing jobs and why universal basic income is our future. Now let's be clear, before we go any further, I think it's morally necessary in a society that can afford it to ensure that everyone has the means to secure the basic necessities of life. There are people out there who disagree with that. People who say that welfare entrenches disadvantage, it discourages workforce participation, it fosters dependence. People who say that the best solution for those slipping through the cracks is to get them into a job. Those people, in my own personal opinion, are a bunch of sad losers. So given this, why am I being such a cold fuck about giving people a bit of money? Andrew Yang's proposal, outlined in his book and across his campaign, is to give $1,000 a month to every adult US citizen. And here we come up against my first issue. $1,000 a month isn't nothing. It's nice. I endorse being given $1,000. But $1,000 a month is $12,000 a year. If you don't also have a job, if you don't have any other income streams, $12,000 a year sounds to me like a recipe for living off the $3 Monash University dal and rice. And probably living in a tent. So UBI can't just stand on its own two legs, can it? $12,000 a year isn't enough by itself. It needs to be an addition to the existing welfare system. The unemployment benefits, the disability payments, the carers payments, the rent assistance. It needs to support what we already have. Right? Let's just double check with Andrew. The UBI would replace the vast majority of existing welfare programs. Our welfare programs are designed to be difficult. Replacing that maze with a simple, monthly, no-strings-attached check would arguably leave a lot of people better off, even if some of them would have to give up some of their existing benefits. Ah, okay. That's good to know. So given that, is it possible that there might just be a little bit of a through line here from this
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income.
to this?
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. The government is not efficient, and there's a lot of waste and fraud. So
this is the chainsaw for bureaucracy.
Now we might be getting somewhere. Welfare of some kind has existed across millennia. Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, that guy, gave a grain dole to citizens who couldn't afford food. And across the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church, the Greeks, the Italian city-states would, from time to time, provide shadows of what we can now see in a modern welfare state. Free access to education, public health. But the idea of a proper social safety net, insurance so that citizens could maintain a basic overall standard of living, didn't really appear anywhere until the late 19th century. In Germany first, of all places, followed by the UK and Australia and, surprise surprise, a whole lot of the Nordic countries. But it's been slow going. In 2024, for the first time ever, over half of the world's population had access to at least one form of social security. At least one payment. And the more developed the country, the more sophisticated the social security system tends to be. It's rare that you'll come across a country that has a truly adequate one. But it's all relative. Australia's social security system is a true labyrinth, a product of reforms dating back to 1900. Reforms which have been stacked on top of one another to produce the overall modern welfare system we have now. National aged and disability pensions in 1908 and 1910 respectively, naturally restricted to those of good character and excluding Aboriginal people, Asians and Pacific Islanders. In World War II, Robert Menzies introduced a child endowment scheme, which was expanded on massively by Labor PMs John Curtin and Ben Chifley, who then introduced a widow's pension, a wife's allowance and unemployment insurance in 1945. And you can see the legacy of these payments in today's labyrinth, the modern Australian social security system. Family tax benefit, parenting payment, parental leave, the age pension, the disability support pension, crisis payments, rent assistance, and the job seeker payment for unemployed people. These benefits and lots more, each targeted towards eligible recipients, evaluated and distributed by a score of frontline service workers whose job is to ensure the money gets to the people it needs to get to. Are there inefficiencies in this labyrinth? Yes. Could the system be simpler? Yes. Could the system be more comprehensive? Yes. The job seeker payment to a single recipient with no children is under $800 a fortnight, a little over $20,000 a year. This is not enough money to live on. For people with no additional income, they need additional support on top of this, which ideally they receive through other payments that are also targeted based on eligibility. Yet navigating a complex system like the one we have in Australia is all the more complex when your resources are limited. The complexity in the modern system can be a bad thing. You can also make the argument that governments make it harder than it needs to be, and that the public is being conditioned to... There's no way to say this nicely. The public has been conditioned to not like poor people. Cabinet papers from John Howard's government in 2001, submitted by the relevant ministers Amanda Vanstone and Tony Abbott, had some really good gear. A level of compulsion is desirable in moving individuals towards economic participation. More needs to be done to ensure that people stay constantly on the radar screen. This goes to the idea of mutual obligation, the virtue of interventions which ensure that individuals who can't find work constantly justify their inability to find work, so that they can be guided towards independence. This sort of sentiment wasn't new at the time, and it still hasn't fully died off. With the exception of the pandemic, giving more money to unemployed people is not something that anyone for a long time has judged to be electorally astute. But even in light of all of this, despite the flaws, the complexities, the victimisation of recipients, and the consequent inadequacy of much of the system, the money is, at least, still getting out there in some capacity, because for the past few years, total welfare payments have floated around at about $200 billion per annum. This is about a third of all spending done by government, with the remaining payments of the government's annual spending of $600 billion or so going to all the other public goods and services: health, education, infrastructure, defence, etc., etc. So again, a little over a third, $200 billion a year or so, of all the government spending goes to social security, a system staffed by public servants who man the phones and try and make sure all of these payments go to the people who need them. And that's how things are right now. Now let's chat about UBI. Let's say we decide to go ahead with UBI and place it bang smack on top of the existing architecture and give everyone a Yang-style payment of $1,000 a month. $12,000 a year then going to every adult person in the country. In Australia, for comparison's sake, this is 21.4 million adults in 2024. $12,000 a year going to over 21 million people. Let's assume these payments are taxable. The average tax rate's about 25%, meaning we get 25% of the money back, and what this gets us to is the payments costing about $190 billion a year. $190 billion a year. So bringing in a UBI at $12,000 a year would effectively double the size of the social security system. A doubling of the size for $12,000 going to absolutely everyone. Now how, you might ask, would you fund that $200 billion in extra payments? $200 billion is hard to find. For parity, you'd probably need to abolish all health, education, defence and infrastructure spending. And to keep the focus here on Australia for the moment, our friends over at Sustainable Australia, the ones I mentioned at the start of the video, the ones who want to bring in a universal basic income, the ones who have put UBI in their name, they want the payment to be way higher than what Andrew Yang suggested. They want it to be $500 a week, taxed at marginal rates, so probably twice as expensive as Yang's proposal, meaning their UBI proposal by itself would cost about $400 billion a year, twice as much as the existing social security system. Now, even though these folks have the luxury of not being a party of government, I will grant that some of their suggestions on how they're going to raise the money to do this aren't that bad. Super concessions, negative gearing, CGT discount, super profits tax, inheritance tax. Sure, great. But even with all these, reality still bites. A UBI would provide significant savings by replacing a range of welfare payments such as AusStudy, veteran payments, parenting payments, the age pension, carer payments, disability support pension, job seeker payment, etc. Etc. Let's not faff about on this. A lot of well-intentioned people think UBI is a good idea. And in a vacuum, it might be. But as fun as it would be to live in a vacuum, we do not, in fact, live in one. UBI, in any meaningful conception, will not be an addition to the existing social security system. The often inadequate but nonetheless essential system of payments that have been developed, refined and provided by over a century now. The UBI is too expensive to be a viable addition to that system. And a lot of the people who are floating UBI as a genuine solution know this. They know that UBI is a Trojan horse. A Trojan horse for dismantling the existing welfare system. As an outside supporter, you might not even realise that you've built a Trojan horse. You might think it's a real horse that you're giving to all those unsuspecting, normal people. But just because you don't think there are any Greeks inside waiting to break out and open up the gates of Troy, it doesn't mean it's not a Trojan horse. If the Greeks are in there, be it Odysseus or Elon or Mr. Virgin Group himself, then you, my friend, are the proud owner of a Trojan horse. So what do we actually have here with UBI? We have a proposal that sounds very nice and progressive and redistributive, but which could only feasibly come to life as a replacement for massive swathes of the existing welfare system, which leaves us with the other argument for UBI, the clutch right-wing argument, that we should replace the existing welfare system with something simpler, something easier to implement, something that will need less public servants to oversee, something more efficient, something like UBI. It's the reason this man in particular, who has recently been fulfilling his desire to roam around gutting government departments, is so supportive. Efficiency, cutting down the number of public servants needed to evaluate claims. A magical productivity dividend you'll get from giving out the payment to everyone. No more special treatment for unemployed people. No more fostering of a culture of dependency, especially if we limit UBI to the size of the existing welfare system. Let's go back to Australia. As we found out a bit earlier, if you get rid of the existing system and replace it with a UBI that costs the same amount of money, everyone's going to get about $1,000 a month. $12,000 a year. Could you live on $12,000 a year? Maybe you can argue you'll be able to give out a bit more money after firing all of the public servants who process all the claims. efficiency. But how much money do you think we'd really save there? Would it really save that much money to be in all of the staff and all of the tools that have been developed over time to ensure that people meet eligibility requirements? ID checks, bank and asset declarations, income declarations, payroll data, previous appointments, cross-checks with all the other government databases. Would getting rid of all of that really save that much money? Well, luckily, it's pretty simple to check. And the simple answer is fuck no. You could abolish all of the departmental funding to Services Australia and you would save less than $7 billion a year. It's there in the annual report. $7 billion is not nothing, but it's a lot smaller than the $200 billion in payments that they oversee. Targeted payments that are actually going out to real fucking people. This is very obvious, and anyone who's saying it will magically give us a better system is either very silly or very disingenuous. And because of this, I think we should have a quick think about Chesterton's fence. Chesterton's fence, the idea that when you're roaming the hillsides looking for a bit of fun and you come across an inconvenient fence, before you take it down, have a little think about why it might have been put up in the first place. Have a quick think about what could be behind the fence. There could be a troll behind the fence. There could be an army of angry geese. There could be neoliberals. There could be Doge. And I'd be especially careful if that fence is a social security system that has been built and refined over 100 years. One which reserves at least a shred of respectability for the people who actually need it. It still might not be a very good fence. It might need some significant repairs and maintenance. It'd definitely benefit from someone stepping in to fund some upgrades from time to time. That'd be brilliant. But one thing that should be abundantly clear is that UBI is not a feasible alternative. UBI, which as we've discussed, can only function by removing the existing fence and replacing it with one that gives less help to the people who need it and more help to the people who don't need it. And if we're really that keen to sink a whole lot of extra time and money into revolutionising social security, we could, bear with me, increase unemployment benefits, increase carer and disability payments, increase the payments that go to the people who need the payments. There's nothing wrong with having ideas. There's nothing wrong with having bad ideas. There's nothing wrong with having ideas that people think are good ideas for a while and then judge later are actually bad ideas. But it's also important to just take a moment from time to time and make sure that the ideas we've heard on social media, the ideas we've heard hyped up from everyone from The Guardian to the techno-feudalists, the ideas which sound like really good ideas, let's just take a moment to make sure that they are actually good ideas.